Hi. Super Mario Galaxy 2 is a game that means a lot to me. It was a big part of my childhood, being the first game I was ever really able to call my own. No second player to argue with, no shared save data to have tampered with. The game was entirely mine to explore. It's been nearly a decade since this passion project of a game stole my heart and changed how I view the medium of video games. They aren't just products, at least not inherently. They have the potential to be works of art made by passionate people who just want to make others happy. And as a fan of this medium, I think that's a really important thing to realize if you want to engage with it. As a kid, I was never able to 100% the game, despite desperately wanting to. I think I collected around 110 stars before getting stuck on a few missions I couldn't beat. In particular, I remember spending way too much time on this freaking chimp challenge in Honey Hop Galaxy. Anyway, during the summer of 2024, I felt a pretty strong urge to return to the game, just to relive some memories. And I ended up starting a fresh save file, falling in love with this game all over again. I know this is largely up to nostalgia, but for me, I don't think I'll ever be able to find something that makes me as happy and carefree as this game does. I ended up loving my replay so much that I continued all the way to 100%. It was a strange time for my mental health since I'd just had a somewhat traumatic experience, and I ended up processing a lot of my thoughts through this game and my connection to it. Fast forwarding a bit to the summer of 2025, the current summer as of my writing, after doing a far less emotionally charged completion of Galaxy 1,
Yo, it's Luigi. Or something, I don't know.
I'd once again felt that urge to return to the second game. Not to 100% it again, the urge wasn't nearly that strong, but just to visit for a while. So I did exactly that. I booted up the game and walked around Starship Mario, talking to some NPCs, soaking in the atmosphere, just sort of vibing. And that's when I had a bit of a revelation. I have a 100% complete save file of my favorite childhood game where I can go anywhere I want to go and do whatever I want to do. No people to save, no stars to find, nothing was required of me because I'd already done everything I was asked. So I did some exploration, using my familiarity with the game to bend the rules a bit and see how far I could take its mechanics. Finding things I'd never found, doing stupid stuff I'd never thought to do, messing around with glitches I'd never found the time to experiment with. I was looking at the game through a completely different lens, a slower one, and a calmer one. Sure, as far as my save file is concerned, I'm not really doing anything of value, but maybe just this once. That's okay. Over the couple of days I'd end up spending with the game, I found a lot more than I expected. It was awesome, probably some of the most fun I've had the entire summer. And now that I've had a few days to sit on that fact and do a little messing around on the side, I think I'm ready to share some of that, just with anyone who'd like to listen. This isn't a send-off to the game. I definitely don't consider it a goodbye. Instead, it's more of a thank you to its developers for creating this wonderful project that stole my heart and kinda changed my life. This video is primarily aimed at people like me, the ultra nerds who know way too much about this game for their own good. But we're a pretty small bunch, and I don't think making this video exclusive territory for such a tiny number of people is a very good idea. I'm sure there are plenty more people who'd love to learn more about this game, but aren't as obsessive about it as I am. And that's fine, reasonable even. Y'all deserve to hear as much of this stuff as you want to. So although this video will still be very specific and detailed, going into the most obscure and inconsequential things, most of which I was probably not supposed to find, I'm going to try my best to provide context for everything I'm saying, so that most people who've done a standard playthrough can follow along just fine. So I won't go over things that are pretty common knowledge under their own entries, but if stuff like that is required to understand something more obscure, it'll be briefly explained. Finally, if you're watching this video in a language other than English using the auto-translated captions, most of it should be pretty understandable, but there are a few parts where I go over grammatical oddities with the English translation, which chances are won't make sense for you. You're cool, you're based, I love you, sorry. Okay, I think that's about all I need to say for the preamble, so on to the ramble. You can actually outrun the starbits from the first crystal in World 2's map by immediately heading back to World 1's portal. They just sort of freeze when you get to the portal. As far as I know, this is the only area where something like this is possible. Every other crystal is too far from a portal, entering levels is too slow. Even the zoom out button doesn't stop you from collecting these guys. I guess you could always quit the game, but then the crystals just respawn and there's no point anymore. Also, just pop quiz for a sec. How many of these crystals are there on the world map? Like, throughout the entire game? 5, 6, 10? Yeah, well, no, apparently there is a grand total of 3, which is news to me. I could have sworn there were more, but nope. There's one past Flip Swap, one before Hightail Falls, and one directly after. They stop halfway into the second world. Why would you even add these? It's not really a big deal. In Shiverburn Galaxy's first star, if you head over to collect the cloud flower and come back to the start with 3 clouds, by chaining together a few long jumps, you can actually reach a starbit crystal that's supposed to be broken with a launch star. The crystal works exactly as it does in a launch star. You don't even have to spin to break it. And from here, if you want to, you can also go a little further and get to this planet, which lets you skip a bunch of the star. Pretty neat. The order that comets and stars are listed is pretty inconsistent. Sometimes comets come last, and sometimes they're in the middle. World 1 is fine, with comets unanimously listed last. World 2 moves everything to the middle, which is weird, but at least it's consistent with itself, except for Bowser's lava layer, I guess, and it just falls apart from there. I was thinking that the order could maybe depend on which ones you completed first, but the list on the wiki is exactly the same as mine, and I pretty much did every star right as it was unlocked, so I doubt the list would be this out of order. Like, don't get me wrong, there is probably a reason. Maybe I'm just being dumb here, but I can't find anything. The galaxy with the longest title is Bowser Jr.'s Fearsome Fleet, with 27 characters. Keep in mind that the Jr. is abbreviated here, meaning that this kid was holding back and could have made this name so long it wouldn't fit on the star list. This fact isn't all that obscure, I think, but it's pretty important if you want to mess around with the game's physics and get to areas you aren't supposed to. For some reason, holding A while performing an aerial spin causes you to go a lot higher and fall slower too. This is probably something you should be doing every time you spin. There's little reason not to, so I won't be mentioning it from this point onward. Just something I sort of needed to mention for anyone unaware. It's very important, especially for the next fact. In Flip Out Galaxy, you can actually get on top of every single side wall using Luigi. I'm gonna go over how to do that here because I think it's interesting, but if you want to figure it out on your own, you can stop watching now or skip to the next fact using the timestamps on the video player. I wouldn't want to ruin the adventure for you if that's your thing. The first one's fairly easy. Just get on top of these platforms and do some backflip spinny stuff to get on top. Not too much use for it, but it's cool. The area that comes right after, all the way to the second checkpoint, seems entirely impossible. Even with a triple jump, even by using the extra spots on the sides, the walls are just too high. And yeah, that's totally correct. But fortunately, there's another method. If you play through the section normally and head over to the second checkpoint, you can do a pretty precise triple jump into a spin, into a wall jump, into a spin to get on top of this wall that's otherwise blocked by a slope. And from there, every previous section on the planet is accessible. The final section is pretty similar to the first one. Just do some backflip spinny stuff to get on the platform to the right of the one with the comet medal, then do some more backflip spinny stuff to get inside this little crevice. You can even get on top of the final star platform by doing some similar stuff there. I'm kinda surprised none of these were caught during playtesting, especially the final section. You get there by doing almost the exact same thing you do to reach the comet medal on the platform that's literally right next to it. Why would you not test that? I'd sort of assumed these were caught and left in on purpose, just for the fun of it, but the messy collision leads me to believe otherwise. I don't know, it's weird, but I'm super glad they were left in. The circle symbol that shows up on the world selection menu in place of levels you haven't unlocked never goes away. Instead, the galaxy's icon is just placed on top. This is most visible in Flip Swap Galaxy, but it's also possible during certain points of the rotations of various other galaxies. For example, Sky Station, Haunty Halls, Beat Block, Honey Hop, etc. It's pretty common knowledge in the Galaxy 2 community that the Luigi ghost in Clockwork Ruins' first star is completely broken. But I feel like the general oddness of these ghosts isn't given enough attention. Like, look at him boarding Flizzard. He's just sorta standing there. Okay. Oh, he's off. Yeah, whenever he's doing pretty much anything that isn't walking or jumping, he looks very odd. Like, don't get me wrong, this is not a complaint. I love this. He looks so goofy and weirdly unexpressively expressive. The save and quit button in the pause menu is really weird. After pressing it, you'll get a pop-up that says save your progress and quit, to which you can answer yes or no. Choosing yes leads to another pop-up that says the game has been saved. Finally, it asks again, do you really want to quit? To which most players would probably say yes, since the purpose of the button is to save and quit. But if you say no, your data was already saved, meaning that this button can also function as a standard save button, which isn't usually an option. It's not particularly useful, given that this button doesn't show up inside of galaxies, but hey, it's there. Vertical momentum is really weird in the Galaxy games. If you jump while another force is pushing you up, you go flying, it's crazy. It's probably the easiest to mess around with in Flip Swap Galaxy, since you have control over when the objects move, and the effects are very visible, to say the least. You'll need to walk off of an activated panel onto a deactivated one, and spin such that you'll be picked up by the deactivated one during its activation animation. Finally, right before the animation is complete, do whatever kind of jump you prefer and absorb the platform's vertical momentum. Backflips are good for verticality, long jumps are good for distance, and standard jumps are good if it's your first time, since they're the easiest to input. There are a ton of areas where you can experiment with this sort of thing, and in my opinion, it's pretty fun to mess around with. Definitely some nice intel for reaching areas you're not supposed to on your own time. This is more of an opinion than a fact, but the world map backgrounds are honestly really beautiful and atmospheric. Unless you're weird like me and enjoy vibing in these for way too long, you spend so little consecutive time in them that they sort of go unnoticed. But yeah, they're just lovely. Especially the one for World S, its colors are astounding. When speaking to the mail toad without any new letters to read, he lets you check out your history of received letters, complete with some on-screen arrows to help you scroll through them, but you can also scroll with the analog stick or D-pad if you feel like it. If you try to scroll past the final letter on either side of the list, you'll get a little animation that tells you there's nothing more to see. To be clear, I'm not trying to pretend that's interesting, there's more here. When receiving a letter, the interface looks similar, but the arrows are missing, since, of course, there's nothing to scroll to. However, the analog stick and D-pad are still fully functional. Don't get your hopes up, there's no bugged out text to read or anything. It just shows the end of list animation from earlier. But the removal of the on-screen arrows leads me to believe that this was not an intended function of the menu, and whoever removed the arrows believed they were patching out the scrolling function entirely, not knowing about the other methods. Not a big deal, I just think it's interesting. Remember those bonus areas where you have to defeat a group of enemies within a strict time limit? Well, guess what? Those are all regular parts of their galaxies, like any other planet would be. You just can't tell most of the time since they have a locked camera, and if you know where to look, there they are. This is most easily visible in Throwback Galaxy, where it's just a short way off from the main planet. Okay, so that's already kinda cool, I guess, but what if I told you that you can just freaking go there? You can go to those planets without using the teleporter. Now, it doesn't work in every galaxy, since specific tricks are needed to get enough distance, but there are methods for a pretty decent chunk of them. An easy one is, again, in Throwback Galaxy. More specifically, it's Second Star, where a couple of long jumps with the Cloudflower can get you there pretty trivially. If you're looking for a tougher one, a good option is Starshine Beach's First Star. Where's the teleporter challenge? Well, it's all the way up there. Oh my gosh, that's insane! If you know your way around this game's glitches, you can probably tell where I'm going with this one. It requires a glitch pretty unanimously dubbed the Infinite Flutter, which allows Yoshi to, well, flutter infinitely. Since it's fairly well known and takes a while to properly explain, I've linked a tutorial in the description and the top right corner for anyone who's out of the loop. I wouldn't want to simplify or skip out on anything, since that would probably just make it even more confusing to newcomers. Anyway, it takes a good while to get there. For me, it was a little over 5 minutes, but if you have the patience, it's really not too bad. Is there any practical use for this? No. I guess if you want more out of it, you can complete the challenge this way, Infinite Flutter all the way back, and then use the teleporter to get back to the challenge with nothing to do, but, like, why would you ever do that? I mean, okay, I guess I did that, so, This trick also works in reverse. Instead of getting to one of these in a way you're not supposed to, you can leave in a way you're not supposed to after entering normally. This is made significantly more of a challenge by the timer, because, yeah, that's a thing now since we're using the teleporter to get in. You have 30 seconds to get back, and in a lot of cases, that's probably not going to be enough. I've only managed to get back successfully in Yoshi Star's second mission, and even that one's pretty tight. So, yeah, definitely a neat challenge if you're into speedrunning or whatever. I certainly think it's quite fun. If you find the Infinite Flutter as fun to mess around with as I do, there's a mod by Beck MK8 called Super Yoshi Galaxy that makes a Yoshi spawn in every star. I'm not using it here since this video is strictly about the vanilla game, but it's still pretty interesting regardless. Actually, while we're on the topic of mods, I should probably mention the ones that I am using here. I'm using Dolphin Emulator to run the game on my MacBook in 1080p, I'm using the Classic Controller mod by Super Hackio to have an easier time using a standard controller, and finally, I'm using the HD Textures mod, also by Super Hackio, to help the textures look better with the higher resolution. I usually prefer playing on console. For me, there's just never going to be a better control scheme for the Galaxy games than a Wiimote, nunchuck, TV, and sensor bar. But I can't deny that watching 480p footage outside of that context isn't really the best, so I figured since I have the means, I might as well. Also, I'm so sorry about the cursor in the bottom right of the screen. I couldn't figure out how to make it go away since I can't drag it off screen like you can on console. It's just gonna be there, I'm sorry. In Cloudy Court Galaxy, there's a super well-hidden one-up under this hedge sculpture of a dinosaur that you can get by crouch walking. I'm not sure if this sculpture is supposed to resemble anything specific from the Mario universe. Maybe Dory? Actually, what are any of these supposed to be? A normal person would probably say, they're just real-life animals, don't look at it too hard. And to that I say, what real-life animals? Like, in the universe, someone probably had to make these. Like, how did they... Did someone make these? Are they natural? I don't know anymore. Galaxy 2's save data icon on the Wii menu is this image of Mario next to the co-star Luma. These little file icons are honestly pretty cool, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people haven't seen them, since it's very far from an everyday experience you look at your save files on a console that doesn't require a memory card. Of all the games I own, the one with my favorite icon is definitely Mater's Tall Tales. What is he doing? Alright, this is gonna be a very long one, so please just bear with me. In Throwback Galaxy, the structure that you climb throughout is repeatedly referred to as a hill by its residents. I don't think that this is an accurate term. First of all, this was pretty clearly referred to as a fortress in Mario 64, but for all we know, this could technically be an entirely separate planet that just happens to look nearly identical. The Mario canon is already very inconsistent, and the Galaxy games kind of canonized the idea of multiple timelines or universe resets or whatever explanations you want to go with, so whatever. Let's just stick with what's in this game. A hill, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, yes, we're really doing this, is a naturally raised area of land not as high or craggy as a mountain. Let's start with the first half about it being naturally raised. Since we're going off of Mario logic, and more specifically Space Mario logic, where areas like this can be naturally occurring parts of the universe, I think it's fair to say that this area could have potentially just shown up like that one day. Or maybe it used to look natural and degraded over time, I don't know. It's never specifically stated otherwise, so sure. The trouble comes from the second half of the definition, not as high or craggy as a mountain. First, the height. There doesn't seem to be an exact range for what's considered a mountain versus a hill, so comparing the size of one to another is pretty redundant, but even if there was one, I've got no clue how to measure this thing, so I can't really compare it to anything anyways. This means that technically I cannot confirm that this is too big to be considered a hill. However, look at it for literally 2 seconds, that's a friggin' mountain! Sorry, I need to calm down, this is not important at all, what am I doing? But, okay, even if someone somehow thinks that this thing is an appropriate size to be considered a hill, the definition also states that it can't be as craggy as a mountain. I have no idea what that means, so let's look it up. Okay, apparently it means of a landscape having many crags. Well, that was useless. What the hell is a crag? Okay, crag definition. A steep or rugged cliff or rock face. Okay, given the amount of rocks with faces on this thing, that is probably the most unfortunate wording that could have been used, but okay. In this context, a rock face is not a rock with a literal face, so we're ignoring that. Regardless, this thing is very steep in numerous areas, meaning that it does indeed have many steep cliffs, meaning that it does indeed have many crags, meaning that it is indeed craggy, meaning that it probably cannot be a hill. There, I did it. I think I proved my point. I don't really know. This is so stupid. What am I doing?